The Valuation Consortium, a comprehensive database of farms that were acquired under the Zimbabwean government fast-track land reform program. Our mission statement. The Valuation Consortium was formed jointly by the 8 private firms involved in farm valuation at the beginning of the fast-track land reform program. We decided to develop a comprehensive database of acquired land to be used for the purpose of compensation in the future. We do not aim to set the rules on valuation methods, but will work within the relevant framework at the time and with whoever is involved. We are independent, non-political, non-confrontational, and do not involve ourselves with any claims on criminal or human rights issues. We aim to facilitate and accelerate the compensation process and would hope to help in the setting of valuation parameters acceptable to all stakeholders. A brief historical note. When Zimbabwe became independent in 1980, out of a total of 39 million hectares, 14.5 million hectares was designated exclusively for large-scale farming. Of this land, some 1.5 million hectares was accounted for by roads, townships and state land, leaving 13 million hectares for large-scale commercial farming. Between 1980 and 1997, about 4 million hectares of commercial farming land was bought by the Zimbabwean government for resettlement on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. To a large extent, this was funded by the government of Britain in the early 80s, but continued up to the end of the 90s at a slower rate, leaving a residue of 9 million hectares of commercial farming land in 2000. Of this farming land, conservancies and indigenously purchased farms occupied some 1.5 million hectares and were not targeted by the land reform program. So this left approximately 7.6 million hectares of commercial farming land, which was to be affected by the fast-track land reform program, which started in earnest in 2000. In 2005, the Zimbabwean government cancelled all commercial farm title deeds, effectively making occupation of commercial farming land illegal, except to those with permits or offer letters issued by the Ministry of Lands. Expropriations continue to this day, with less than 600,000 hectares still in partial operation for one reason or another. Our mandate. During the fast-track land reform program, it became clear that farmers needed professional and comprehensive valuations of their assets as a basis for future compensation claims. The 8 to 10 agricultural valuers working for different companies could not cope with the work. So it was decided to create a database to store all the relevant information for the valuation of farms that wished to participate. This was done on an at-risk basis. In other words, a valuation fee would be payable when and if compensation was paid. Up to 2006, the Valuation Consortium had registered about 2,500 farm titles on the database. In 2007, the situation changed when the Commercial Farmers Union of Zimbabwe realized the need for a comprehensive valuation database covering all acquired commercial farming land, including farms which were not registered with us. The then CFU president instructed us to gather valuation data for the whole commercial farming sector and helped us to find finance for the exercise. Therefore, there's a second mandate created by the farmers' representatives, which currently drives us. The database. The database attempts to capture in a logical and sequential order the information required to carry out an asset valuation of the land and permanent improvements of a farm. It is flexible and allows for a variety of valuation techniques. For example, those of the Zimbabwean Government Compensation Committee, which requires a DRC basis which excludes land, or by international valuation methods, whether they are on a market value basis or a depreciated replacement cost basis. It collates the data sequentially. Therefore, for each farm, we have structured the database in 7 screens, progressing from the client details through to the valuation. First section. Screen 1 is client details. There's a reference number with a suffix so that more than one farm, up to 99, can be recorded for each individual. This page includes client details, details of his representatives, accountant and valuation firm with addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, etc. On the same page are the property legal details as recorded by the Deeds Office, with the district, intensive conservation area, legal description and local farm name, size, deed of transfer number and the registered owner. Also in the first section are mortgages and water rights. Screen 2 is location and mapping, giving the location of the farm in terms of directions, the 1 to 50,000 sheet reference, Mercator grid reference, world coordinates, natural regions, altitude, and rainfall and soils as per the rainfall and soil maps. Screen 3 is farm-specific information, applying only to the soils and natural water supply, arable and types of arable, grazing, types of grazing, appropriate agri-tech soil classifications, and details of natural water. Screen 4 is development and improvements, starting in a logical order from the main house, secondary housing, staff housing, then on to general farm buildings, sheds, stores, and tobacco barns and special buildings. Screen 5 refers to development in terms of roads, fencing, water and electricity supplies, dryers, silos and horticulture. Screen 6 is irrigation, water storage, types of irrigation, special canals and so on. The second half of this section describes the farming enterprises during normal years. At the end of each screen, there is a space for comments and insertion of spot values. The figures are then manually carried forward to Screen 7, the Valuers page. This page allows the valuer to make individual decisions about the farm, for example, additions for specialist buildings, bulk and grain silos, etc., which don't fall within the main body of the valuation. The valuer is able to adjust his figures in terms of a quality factor for the main houses and dwellings, a depreciation factor for the farm buildings overall, and an adjustment for the quality and location of the farm, and an adjustment for turnover in terms of type of enterprise if a discounted cash flow DCF method is considered. The valuer then has the choice of Open Market Value A, which is the preferred international best practice method. This is based on the physical characteristics of the farm, i.e. its soils, amount of arable, irrigation, the development and the quality. Market Value B, or Discounted Cash Flow Basis, which is based on the farming enterprises and potential turnover. DRC, Depreciated Replacement Cost Method, which calculates the new replacement cost for each permanent improvement, then depreciates it by a factor of, say, 60%, to reflect condition and remaining life. The second section. The database can generate reports in any format required, as a valuation role, as a spreadsheet for selected areas, or for the database as a whole. The information to be included on the valuation role can be selected from any of the data and would normally include reference, client name and details, property details, location, size and values, through to as much information from the database as is required. For each individual title, it will generate and print a full report and valuation. The third section. The setup facility allows the operator of the database to set appropriate valuation figures for the data fields of the valuation in appropriate units such as rates per square meter, rates per hectare, rates per unit, and so on. These lookup tables enable a variety of flexible calculations to be made, leading to the valuation of the property. General reporting. In addition to reporting the details of an individual farm or a valuation role, the database can find and report on a flexible, regional, or total basis on any aspect or information contained in it. It can answer questions, for example, on physical aspects. How many hectares of arable type 5E soils are located in Mashonaland Central Province? On development. Where are the single-source bulk tobacco curers in Darwindale District? Or how many farms grow coffee? On legal or administrative issues. How many Danish farmers are there in the country? GIS Mapping Project. In light of the consortium's mandate, we needed to learn the total numbers of farms affected by the land reform program. At this stage, we obtained GIS files which have cadastral details of all commercial farming titles. This mapping was linked to the database and initially recorded all the farms that had registered with us. It later became necessary to determine the status of all non-registered farms. These were categorized and color-coded on the map. Within the GIS software, a separate database exists with records of each cadastral. For farms that have registered with us, these records link to our valuation database. For farms that are not registered with us, the GIS database stores information about the farm, such as ownership, etc. The GIS software is a complex and powerful tool with the ability to calculate various mathematical and logical functions, giving us increased capability to collect, store, and use data for valuation purposes. For example, Gomo Estate is registered on the database. Three Sisters Farm is not registered, but we are aware of the owner and the size of the property. Good Hope is still partially in operation, and the owner name and property size is known. Inyatsi is purchased by an indigenous farmer, and the size of the property is known. The results of the mapping exercise are as follows. Properties taken through the Fast Track Land Reform Program total 5,300 properties, with a total size of 7,650,000 hectares, of which 3,750 properties are registered on the database, with a total size of 5,400,000 hectares. 367 farms are still partially in operation, with a total size of 636,000 hectares. Farms that were legally purchased by indigenous farmers total 1,163 properties at 1,070,000 hectares. Government-owned property such as state and purchase lands total 6,750,000 hectares. Government-owned communal and safari land total 21,750,000 hectares. Land which belongs to individuals that have been permitted to operate on a political basis has been classified as quasi-political, which totals at 450,000 hectares. All other unaffected property such as townships, plots, small holdings, clubs, schools, churches, hotels, mines and industries in the commercial farming area total at 540,000 hectares. The unidentified and unknown properties cover 195,000 hectares. Use of Google Earth. Most farms had been valued at one time or another prior to the start of the Fast Track Land Reform Program, so the Valuation Consortium had access to a lot of information, including building sizes, etc. Some properties had not had proper valuations done, and therefore there's need to verify the information provided by the farmer himself. At this time, physical visits to the farms are still not possible. However, some verification can be done using Google Earth Pro. With Google Earth Pro, we are able to view, identify, and measure the improvements quickly and accurately. Where possible, we do this with the owner himself. The method has been tested against physical measurements on the ground to an accuracy of over 98%. With the added feature of a timeline, it has been possible to view many areas at different dates, which enables us to compare the improvements on the property before and after acquisition. The example here shows the farm as it existed in 2005 and the changes made between then and 2010. We have created 150 valuation zones throughout the country. Each zone is based on certain characteristics such as location, soil type, rainfall, and altitude. These give rise to similar land values within a particular zone, with improvements being valued separately. Valuation roles and reporting can be done by individual valuation zone. Peer assessment. Farmers have expressed concern that relative quality of development and conservation are not reflected in the valuation. This is a valid point, as it is impossible for any valuer to complete a full inspection of every property. We therefore have initiated a peer assessment factor in the valuation. Through intensive conservation areas and field days, farmers were aware of the relative merits of other farms throughout their area and had very good knowledge of neighbouring farms and their intrinsic and developmental potential. We tasked these farmers to give an opinion on the quality of the farms in their area. We believe peer assessment is a useful and creditable tool. It must be emphasized that the peer assessment is not a valuation, but merely an aid to the fine adjustment of valuations, which are based on normal criteria. The areas that have been assessed are reflected on the map in yellow, the darker coloration showing a higher number of peer assessments for a property, thus averaging out sampling errors. The peer assessments are recorded on a spreadsheet. The results are then analyzed and used in the valuer's adjustment fields on screen 7 of the valuation database. Pursuit of compensation. Pursuit of compensation in cooperation with the CFU and other bodies has led us to having contacts with and making presentations to representatives of the EU, UK and other international representatives, regional government representatives, international finance organizations, the government of Zimbabwe, in particular the Ministry of Lands, and many other important bodies. The Valuation Consortium looks forward to establishing further contacts with professionals and technicians, particularly within the Ministry of Lands and the World Bank. We hope the database, which has evolved over more than 10 years, will help in the fair and speedy resolution of the compensation issue.